Hey Joe, we're here in August already. Ready with a pretty quick time to, the dog days of summer. We've got a interesting guest here today. We're going back to our cyber roots with the way that everything's going. Starting to see, in the cyber world, what I'm seeing again from where I'm at is people just seem to kind of not really understand it if they're not in cyber circles, right? I think there's certainly some interest. But just the everyday person, when it comes to cyber, I don't know if they really grasp what's going on. Recently in the news, with our friends overseas in China, they had to shut down the consulate here in Houston, Texas, and it had to do with some cyber type of things going on. So, what's kind of state of cyber these days in the dog days of summer coming up before this big election?
You know, well, I just finished reading Teresa Payton's book, and then she talks about the election, the 2016 election. And I know she's been out talking about, that sort of thing, happening all over again. So funny thing about cybersecurity and risk, when just everyday circles, it comes up in conversation. And most people that I interact with who are outside of IT don't really, it's sort of, it's someone else's problem kind of a thing. They see what's happening, but don't really apply it to them, except if they've had they've been compromised in some way. It's funny that that's the way it works inside some companies. Executive teams don't often really understand it, and they use that lack of understanding as sometimes an excuse for not making the investments or pleading ignorance. But it's challenging. We're thrilled to have James with us today. But what have you been working on, Mike? What's been happening in your world?
Yeah, well, from a family perspective, we've been getting some of the vacations in, so it's been good to get the folks out of the house, and then kids are getting ready to go back to school here soon. So we're preparing for that, and I get to wear my IT hat, my CIO hat. I don't know if I really call myself a CIO. I need your help, Joe, but setting up the home network and making sure everything's working and kind of practicing what you preach, right? So it's kind of fun to see the family come to me about something. Well, outside of paying for food or dessert or groceries, right, or vacation. So it's kind of neat to talk to them about technology. Um,
Yeah.
so how about you?
Same thing. I've been active. I've got a number of customers. It's funny that the number of clients and prospects seem to be on the rise. I think there's something about the pandemic that is where people are trying to sharpen the saw, just get a little bit better at a particular area or skill set. I've been working with the Charlotte Area Technology Collaborative on some really fun initiatives to help the Mecklenburg County school system. Derek Root is their CTO, and he's a member of our Valentine IT group. And he's got some really fascinating and interesting challenges, as you can imagine, trying to take that entire massive school system and get it online for this year's school semester. So that's been fun. We're partnering with those guys on some of the programming. Hopefully we'll have some announcements coming out on that in the next week or two, but that's been a lot of fun. And for excitement, vacation, I drove to Valentine to pick up my groceries last week.
Nice.
That was really
Across the
exciting.
border. You went across the border. Do you have
Yeah,
to
went
quarantine?
across
How
the
long do you have to
border.
quarantine for? A couple
Had to
minutes,
figure
like
out
30
which.
minutes?
Yep, that was exciting. The big issue there is which car do I take? Which one did I drive? A week ago, last time I went.
What's the
That's been.
gas difference? I know you South Carolinians, you
Oh,
probably save a quarter, usually save at least a quarter on it.
it's I haven't filled my tanks in a long time, but you're probably right. Since you're driving like 5 miles a week. So they're working on the roads outside of our neighborhood, and I wouldn't even know because I'm not on the roads to even see it. But some of my neighbors who've been brave enough to venture out say, "Oh, they look good."
Well, it's definitely interesting. There's a lot more vehicles on the road. I've been out and about, so braving it. But with that, our guest today, that's kind of how I got introduced to him. Is he's very well versed in the cybersecurity groups here in Charlotte, and really helped us from the Valentine IT group. Helped us, sponsor some scholarships for local cybersecurity camp that was going on here. I'm not sure if they had theirs this year or forgot postponing. We could ask our guest about that today. But for selfish reasons, super excited about having our guest on today because I've learned a lot just sitting around from this person and their visibility and kind of getting to know a little more about cyber. So with that, Joe, who do we have on the podcast today?
Oh, we're very fortunate to have James Kidwell with us today. James leads Novolex's IT governance, risk compliance, and security programs, and he also provides strategic and tactical advisory and support services for corporate GRC and internal controls. He's got an incredible diverse background, more than 25 years of technical management and consulting experience across an amazing spectrum of different industries: food service, higher education, telecommunications, healthcare, manufacturing. He has a law degree from Salmon P. Chase College of Law, which is pretty interesting for a background. And he keeps up with trends and serves in our community as a volunteer and leading in various professional organizations and chapters. He's super enthusiastic about cybersecurity and the private sector partnerships that he works with to strengthen and improve protection of critical infrastructure sectors. So we're thrilled to have James with us today. James, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Mike. Pleased to be here. It's my pleasure. Absolutely. That diversity does speak a lot about my own personal interests. So it's not just job opportunities that kind of keep me in diverse circles. It's just something that I enjoy. So one thing not mentioned in that bio is I'm not the traditional person that was an IT major in college. I first started out with international business. Then that morphed into pre-med. And did 3 years of pre-med, was almost ready to be a doctor, but had some family pressure to do law, got some lawyers in the family. And, but I had an interest in philosophy and business administration. So I finished that part of the degree out and then went to law school thinking that I was going to be the next LA Law with my brother, who is a longtime trial attorney in another part of the country. But I found out that I really didn't want to do that. So anyway, so diversity just kind of comes with it. I'm one of those persons that has varied interests. And I think that actually helps with cyber, with leadership, with being able to kind of roll with what gets thrown at you. As it turns out, not just in your career and in your personal life, but what we've all been facing, right, with the global pandemic of coronavirus. Having some diverse experience allows you to not look so hard at out-of-the-box solutions that are proposed, right? So I think that served me well. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. That was a great introduction. I'm sure you guys have plenty of questions, but I'll pause now because I know that Mike probably wants to keep us going down a straight and narrow path here so we don't get too nebulous in our podcast.
Well, I'd love to hear how you found your way into cybersecurity. How did that path reveal itself to you?
So back to the diverse thing and just the varied interest, the thing that got me into IT to begin with was hardware and technology. I've always been, even as a child, interested in STEM type topics. And my father is an engineer and he's a geologist. And, I just kind of was always interested in things geeky, space travel, for example, math, science. But when I finally got my first computer way back when, way more than 25 years ago, I fell in love with it. And I quickly learned that it was not capable of doing some things that I wanted to do with it. So I started modifying the computers right away. I mean, I even used to spend some of my student loans while I was putting myself through college on bits of hardware so I could soup up my computers. And so I was really a hardware guy. And then that led to me taking my career into the data center and then up through the ranks, through middle management, through IT, from hands-on and from engineering, more towards solution design and managing teams, project management, a lot of infrastructure stuff more than on the application side. But, that came later. And of course, I lead compliance program now for a global manufacturing company, and I work very closely with finance and accounting at the corporate leadership level, as well as with all the business units and with their ERP teams and some of the financial business people that interface with them. And so it's been a very kind of fun journey that just really started out with my love for playing with hardware and taking things apart and fixing things.
That's great. Yeah, my experience in technology, I actually have a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science. I think it was like the second or third actual class to actually move through the program back then, because that's how old I am. But and it was all accident. It was an accident. I played basketball in college, and one of the professors encouraged me to take a class in Fortran. And that's how my career in IT started, which is a long time ago. So it's funny how these things happen, right?
No, and that's interesting. A similar thing happened to me. In fact, when I was going to law school, I didn't clerk at a law firm, although I did some briefs, did some revocable living trust advising, because I had a credential to do work like that on the side. Another interest of mine that kind of changed my mind. I didn't want to go down that path. But otherwise, I had technology jobs the whole time I went through college, the whole time I went through law school, and it just seemed like the natural fit for me. So kind of like you, once you get the IT bug, regardless of what the subtopic is that you might want to specialize in, it's kind of infectious, right? I mean, it's what we always talk about. It's why we're together in this podcast, and I'm fortunate to have had such an interest in it, because now just look how technology relates and connects everything in the world. I mean, except for some very esoteric, manual, non-technology endeavors, just about everything that society does nowadays is connected with technology, even manufacturing businesses, right? So it's kind of cool to be part of that, and to have that long-term vision, to have seen the trends firsthand for the last 25 years. It's definitely a new world.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I feel like I've had a whole bunch of different careers over the 42 years I've been in IT. Every 5 years, it seems to be completely different. And, it's when people talk about, your willingness to change and be changed and accommodate and embrace change, I think it's by default in our industry. That's prerequisite. If you don't like change, then probably not the industry for you. But that's true in almost all walks of life. Love to hear a little bit more about Novalex and what you're doing there, and for our listeners, tell us a little bit about the company and kind of its size and sort of the major challenges you're facing to the extent you can share that with us. What are the big cybersecurity challenges you're facing today?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to share that. I won't be able to dive down into too much detail,
Sure.
But in some broad brush strokes, I would invite anybody that wanted to know about a company like ours just to look at the corporate website, which is Novolex.com. And there you can see the size and scope of the enterprise. But what we are is essentially a manufacturer of paper and plastic goods. We used to consider ourselves maybe not necessarily a critical infrastructure sector. That has all changed since coronavirus, and actually before, but we did more manufacturing outside of the critical space in terms of just raw revenue. But now we manufacture PPE, and so we have some contracts to help the world out in that, because we have the raw material and the engineering skill to be able to and the agility to do that and to meet those markets. But what is probably familiar for most folks in recognition of our brands is anytime you go to a store, a fast food store, a supermarket, a big box store, a department store. Our company owns a bunch of brands that make those bags and those products. So here in the Charlotte area, if you shop at Kroger, we make both the plastic and the paper bags for them. We make Walmart bags. We make just more restaurants than I can count. including national chains. But in addition to that, we also make industrial can liners, bank bags, food service inserts, supplies for healthcare and biohazardous waste bags, and now PPE to protect healthcare workers and science workers. So it's kind of, since we started out talking about diversity in career, it's a very diverse portfolio of product. This is kind of fun for me because manufacturing is the last journey or the last stop for me on my journey through the multiple fields that you mentioned when you introduced me. So some of this was greenfield for me, but as you and the guests watching the podcast will know, there are some tenets of any discipline that are applicable to any industry, right? I mean, at the end of the day, data protection, sound data protection practices, sound cybersecurity, proactive planning to meet those risk areas, they're the same in any industry. Now, in terms of regulated activity, there's some very specific requirements that we all have to do depending on in which area that we operate. But Novalex is a pretty good company, and so we're mostly in Europe and North America. We have about 65 plants. We have approximately 10,000 employees, and it's a true global enterprise. So what's been fun for me since joining the company a little over 2 years ago was being able to implement some programs that weren't in place before because we've grown so large because of merger and acquisition kind of quickly. So you guys know, having guests before and having worked in enterprise IT and been in corporate America for a long time, to understand that certain things scale, certain things don't. And so that's been kind of, my biggest opportunity. Sometimes it's a challenge, but to get these things going and to start out with not much of an org chart because you're in greenfield territory, and then build by consensus and education to get the budget you need and the buy-in and the commitment of what turns out to be resources and other people's org charts to be successful. And that's, I think those of us that lead programs know that may be probably the one thing that you're never fully reached a maturity level at, right? Convincing people to make investment in things that they may not know or have awareness of how important it really is in the big picture for the success and the health of the company. And you made a comment about that, in fact, Joe, when right before you introduced me, but how true is that, right? So that's kind of my everyday life. And, some days I wake up and there's some uphill battles, and other days I look back and with my peers and with my leaders, and we say sometimes, oh my goodness, look what we've done just in the last year and a half. It's pretty amazing to have some capability that we knew we wanted, or that you told us that we should have, but we didn't quite get why we needed to be there, but now we see it together. That's a good feeling.
Yeah, I think that notion of resilience, if in our industry, especially in cybersecurity and risk, you've got to have resilience, because you've got convincing to do every day. You've got people who don't understand and people who need to be convinced, and especially people who have the purse strings sometimes when you've got to make an investment and they don't understand what you're asking for. That's been the challenge. I've come up with a million metaphors and different ways of describing why do I want to spend money on identity access and management? What is that going to do for me? How have you had to deal with those sorts of issues in your career? The convincing part,
Sure. Well, as I just alluded to, first of all, just having your center, being calm to to be able to explain to the people in terms that they can understand and not get too technical or too acronymy, if you will. My CFO, even still to this day, has to kind of remind me about that, because, you know, you're so close to the subject matter. It's easy to forget and then start hurling acronyms. So, well, you know, it's true. Sometimes even people, not the leaders that you're having to convince to make an investment or why they should care about why you want to change culture around security or around privacy or around risk management. They may not be familiar with terms that we as professionals just kind of take for granted. A good example of that is one of the things that we've recently done is roll out a security awareness and education tool, and we didn't have that before. And so I had to coordinate that with the HR function and with the leaders and with the legal team and get everybody on board as to why we really need to do that and why cybersecurity is everybody's concern. It's not just the leadership at the top of the organization that are being attacked. It's everybody. It's all of us, and anybody that sits behind a computer or anybody that uses equipment that is connected to the internet. And to get the buy-in and to keep that organic conversation going, you know, when you don't get the movement that you want, I mean, that really is an art. And it's something that if you're not successful right away, you just got to keep plugging away, but just be patient. And so I haven't always been patient in my career because I'm so close to things that I have passion about. And I know you guys can relate to this, and I'm sure people in the audience can too. We have cognitive biases because we're so close to the things that we're passionate about. Now, I may know all kinds of stuff about technology risk, but I may be the worst person to try to teach it or explain it just because it all makes sense to me, right? So someone in marketing or communications or in the HR department might be able to train somebody to be a cyber professional way better than me. And they may have not spent any of the time I have learning the subject matter, but because that's what they're good at, right? So that has kind of been part and parcel of how I've been successful at Novalex to get certain initiatives, projects, and budgets for investment, you know, approved. It was to just keep honing away at that, learning how to be patient, gathering that getting that cultural awareness and doing it by consensus and not doing it by fear. That's kind of an important point here. Fear can only get you so far. And you guys mentioned I think, Mike, at the top of the podcast, you mentioned some of the news items out there, and not just COVID, right? But just specifically around cybersecurity risk. There is so much fatigue in the world in general, not just in our profession. My family members have fatigue from it. You know, my daughters and my wife, they hear things on the news and they're like, oh my goodness, what's this next big thing on the horizon? What's this storm brewing? And you know, and in corporate America, we kind of get beat down and fatigued from it to the point where, like, even leaders sometimes just like, oh my God, make it, you know, James, help me make sense. You and your team and the CIO, help us make sense out of this because it's just too much. But that's our role, right? So we kind of have to do that homework. Again, going back to my advice to stay patient with yourself and get centered and always ask for help. One of the blessings I have here in the Charlotte area community as well is in some of the regional and national peer groups that I work within because of my professional organization volunteering in different orgs, is that people are in this for the right reasons. Like, I'm here sharing my thoughts because I hope at the end of this hour, something I said inspired somebody, you know, to think about a challenge in a different way. or to maybe reach out and ask me a question, or to share it with somebody else, because that's how we get movement through that to larger groups. And so that I'm blessed for that. And so that's why I do these things, and I will continue to do so, although my bandwidth keeps getting impacted by the additional roles and responsibilities that I take on in the workplace. But you guys know how that is, right? Once you show you're capable,
absolutely,
you typically get more fun things to do. But it's all good though, right? I would rather be rather be in the situation than I am than be bored.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing there, not to go back to your acronyms, but GDPR is just complex enough being an international company. And then we've got our local friends, GDPR, and our friends in California. So I know there's some other state things.
Another acronym in there. You missed one, CCPA, right?
Yeah. Try to keep it above board, yeah, for folks in the know. But it's just it's complex, right? Just to stay on top of just GDPR overseas is enough, not on top of everything else, right? So I guess, James, how do you prioritize during these things? What helps you prioritize, your strategy and in the company, again, because there's a lot of different things that again, not only even reactive, right? There's certain things that if there's fire, you got to go put it out too. So how do you kind of prioritize? What helps you?
Well, this will also sound like a cliche kind of answer, but it's so true. You guys have heard the term, and I'm sure the audience is familiar with risk-based planning, right? A risk-based approach. What happens in regulated industries and with companies that are new to being able to demonstrate substantial compliance with any regulatory requirement is, that new thing that if it is in a business that's regulated, you now are in a regulated industry. Or even if not everything you do is regulated, you have some activity in your business that's regulated, and that's a culture change, right? So, but at the end of the day, you just still have to keep it maybe not necessarily top of mind amongst the leadership and in the workforce, but you have to keep reminding them. And that comes back to that patience that I talked about before. You can't just ignore compliance because it's not day-to-day operations. Now, it's true that the day-to-day operations of any business, I mean, that's first priority, right? Take, for example, what we do. We buy raw product, we transform that product into end user products, and we sell those products. If that breaks down, we can't pay the bills, right? We can't keep the lights on. We can't do it. And in lean environments where there's high performance and high performance expectations on productivity and financial performance, that's easier said than done, right? And so that's been a challenge for me, being new to the manufacturing environment, not necessarily new to the idea of turning a profit and making sure that your enterprise is more than breaking even, right? But we have some very, very smart people running our organization who are experts at that, in science and in business and in finance. And so to kind of get that all together, get those people understanding that compliance and cybersecurity and risk management and data protection are really a business requirement in this modern age. Even our manufacturing processes, some of the equipment may be connected to the internet. There's risk there that there may not have been substantial awareness about in the past. It's a constant risk-based approach to raise education and awareness and to get the buy-in and the approval to start making incremental improvements and getting maturity in the different pockets across the spectrum of risk that you need to address as a leader and as a company, right? So and that's my message always, is just don't forget, on these regulated activities, it may be okay if we're late, if we're only partially compliant, as long as we're still going forward. Because at the end of the day, where you get fines, where you get in trouble with regulators and regulating authorities and enforcement authorities, is when you gave up, right? You started it, you might even had a good plan, but then that's all you really had was a plan. So now, I'm not saying that the programs that I lead or that my company is the shining star in the world that's already reached that nirvana, because I'm not. But not many companies I'm aware of have either, right? Especially American companies trying to be compliant with international global regulatory requirements. And of course, it depends on industry, and it depends on the regulation. But that really is it, is keep that always in mind, that this is a business requirement. It's not the number one. We can't stop making the things we make, or we can't stop doing the things that we do that give us our identity and give us a paycheck, but to always keep that in mind. I mean, I think I'm starting to repeat myself now, but I think, that's my takeaway on that question. I mean, that's how I have to do it to keep my own sanity, right? And to also be able to demonstrate achievement when I'm asked to show what's our status with this initiative or that program or this project. That helps me keep it all real and relational on that road, that maturity model. That is really, that's, if I didn't have that in my handwritten notes that I change every day, and I cross out the things that I've done and go on to my next notebook and all that. If I didn't have that, I'm not sure if I would be as effective as I am, and I would definitely be less effective. That's for sure.
You were mentioning the cybersecurity awareness program that you just launched. Could you comment about any nuances that you might have had to deal with relative to, providing that service to folks in Europe versus here in America? Are there cultural differences that you had to sort of factor into that training, or is it fairly common training across the pond?
Oh, that's a great question. And the answer, at least in my experience, surprisingly, is that has not been a challenge at all. So now there have been challenges in some of the activities to get us ready to do it, but it had more to do with a culture adoption, because I mentioned at the top of the hour that we've grown through merger and acquisition. Just a half a dozen years ago, we were a much smaller company than we are now. But because the technology risk in the UK is the same as the technology risk in the United States or in Canada or even in Asia Pacific, we all kind of have the same technical challenges there. We're attacked constantly by cyber criminals and others that want to get treasury, steal product. The news articles are plentiful each week. If you follow the sources, there's, again, going back to the fatigue factor, and oh my God, it's almost too much. But what I will say though about the security and awareness tool and the approach that was kind of surprising was that the biggest factor that led to acceptance in multiple groups at high levels across the organization in the corporate function, and even now through matriculation to the business units, was the first buy-in that I got was by bringing in external people to help me raise that awareness. I found quickly that when you already have someone's trust and credibility, but you may not be that best spokesperson, reach out to your friends. And so last year, I had one of the local FBI cyber agents come out and address the entire executive leadership team who had flown in from all around the country, so they could hear why we are all a target, and that why anybody in the company that's not in my shoes or in the IT department, why we should care. And that one event was such a success that it really opened some eyes and led to subsequent conversations that then just allowed me to show my craft and to introduce other ideas and some facts that weren't too overwhelming about the risk. Again, not playing too much on the fear card, right, to get us to do it. And then lo and behold, go do it, make it happen. And the value now that we've rolled the program out it's self-demonstrating. We're showing the leaders through statistics that we have learned from, initial strength assessments on skills, and we've worked with the HR partners to coordinate and make these modules, these learning modules, be mandatory for all employees and all new hires, and we've been rolling it out in phases, so that again, because of the fatigue factor in cyber, it's not too great on the workforce in general. The acceptance level is still very high, and the performance level is maybe the second most surprising thing, besides the fact that it was having some external people come in and help me demonstrate to the company at the high level why we needed to do it. But now they can see, because of the tracking and the management and the trending that's going on as we're learning this together, how valuable it really is. And everybody has to take it. That's the cool thing. So, and I've got some very colorful feedback from some of the executives that have had to take it. And I'm sure they're nudging me in the ribs a little bit, but they're all learning. They love it.
A question about, do you have anybody asking you to make that training available to family members?
No, you know what? I have not, but I have tried to create a culture where anybody that wants that, come and get it. And because we have international travelers, and sometimes we even travel into China, there's some very specific technical risks, especially if you're going to be getting on networks in those environments, and how to protect the assets and protect the people. Through that process and through that education, and that was separate before we rolled out security awareness for the entire workforce, those conversations did come into play. Like, how do you protect the family? And now that our company really has a visible information security program, again, this is kind of greenfield for a company when we were smaller, but now that we're a global enterprise, we do periodic announcements, and I keep the entire workforce up to date with announcements that I put out in the name of our CFO and our CIO, and they go out to everybody. So we talk about the business email compromise. We talk about the phishing. We set this up. I wish I could say it was my grand plan from day one, but I knew that to get people to take the modules seriously, and to care about reporting what looks like it might be a phishing or what might be business email compromise, that we would get high adoption, after that. And so, hindsight is 2020, and I'm very lucky, knock on wood, that I've kind of helped build that culture of security, because it's making the future look a little bit easier. And I know there will be hiccups and sometimes operations, and coronavirus pandemic, by the way, was a huge operational and financial challenge for us as a company. And we had to put certain initiatives, big one, not just in IT, but even in a production environment, on hold. When we take a multi-trillion-dollar hit to the economy, who has money to go buy our product, right? So and you guys probably want to know more about that too, because that's been a, shall I say, a very busy topic in the CIO and CISO groups that we are also a part of together and separately in the community here. That's top of mind topic lately.
Yeah. In your manufacturing operations, did you say you had to temporarily shut down production for a while?
I alluded to that, but I don't want to get too much into like the details of our
Sure.
of our toils and travails. We had to make some tough decisions, like many companies,
Right.
that have had to do some furloughs and some moving of assets around and some putting things on pause.
Yeah.
We've had to do that. I don't want to get into specifics,
Sure.
but yes, we've had to put some things on pause. We've had a little bit of reduction in force. That's very unfortunate. You don't ever want to see that, and especially when you have to.
There's so many companies that have gone through that, and I think I'm concerned about the next 6 or 9 months when we're still in the middle of this thing, and it doesn't look like a vaccine is around the corner. I mean, they're certainly making progress, but I think in real terms, I think we're stuck with this social distancing, mask wearing program for many more months to come.
Well, it is,
yeah.
and it is, Joe, and it's being the head of security in a global enterprise, puts me in a position to be aware in advance of certain things, and it's heartbreaking to know that when you're going to lose.
It is
potentially, anyone that's going to have to go home and tell their family that they're going to be looking for a job during this very difficult time.
Yeah.
So let's keep those people in our thoughts, especially the ones that we personally know that have experienced that. And if someone needs a helping hand, by all means, do what you and your family can do, and keep sending positive thoughts, and if you're a person of faith, keep them in your prayers, and do community volunteering and send money to help people in need. I mean, these are just things that we all, many of us do anyway, even before the pandemic. But now it's probably critical to do that. But we had to adjust, and we had to adjust to a remote workforce. We had to make some very quick decisions about how to maybe reallocate some of our money earmarked for different investments, to be able to do that, to keep as many people on the job as possible and keep them productive. And it was a difficult balance because, as you know, we're a manufacturing company, so we have people that can't just work from home. You got to go into a factory and run a great big piece of equipment that turns raw material into a finished product, or in a series of processes to do it. And so the mask wearing that you mentioned, and the social distancing, and how you have to adapt process in a manufacturing plant to keep workers safe, was another consideration. As is telecommunication equipment that we've had to make an investment in, so we can reduce the travel because of the travel challenge that's brought around by the restrictions on travel because of the coronavirus. There's so many things get touched. It's never ending almost. And again, IT is right there in the center of it, and security and data protection and privacy is there's that nexus, there's that overlap around and that globe around all of that activity. Yeah. So we're definitely busy, always thinking out of the box, always trying to do the right thing. But something that you mentioned before was the good thing about being a diverse in your mind, whether you're diverse in your operations or not, will definitely help, because we have all been challenged. The world has been challenged to think outside the box since this thing happened. No doubt.
Yeah, the fatigue factor, no matter how I convince myself it's not really affecting me, I find myself where, it is. And My wife and I've mentioned this before, Chief, on these podcasts, but my wife and I are on different sort of playing fields. And when I'm up, she's down. When I'm down, she's up. So we kind of help each other out, thank God. But I woke up this morning thinking, man, this is crazy. And then I see an email or a LinkedIn article from Bill Gates who says, yep, COVID's really bad, but climate change is going to be even worse. So like, oh, that's not what I needed to start my day.
I know. So yeah, perspective is a good thing, but a healthy, I don't know, a healthy filter on perspective is probably conducive to more, to better mental health than not, to your point. No, that's for sure. And we have to support each other in our family too. We have all been going stir crazy in the Kidwell household since the lockdown. One of the family members doesn't have a choice. They have a role where they have to go to work every single day, and they have to work with the public. And so the safety consideration and the high tension sometimes, because people just in general wake up, just like you just mentioned. You never know what the challenge is going to be every day, and it wears on you. And some people just don't get out. So we as leaders need to consider these things, and I'd like to touch on that real quick, if I might. I don't know how much time we have left, but these visual meetings, like the one we're doing for the podcast today, where we can see one another's face, that is one of the biggest positive game changers culturally in our company. And I've heard that from feedback from others across industries and our peers across the country, but especially here in Charlotte. When you dial into a phone, into a meeting by phone, and you choose, even if you have the ability, to have video, but you don't, the tenor, the tone, the way you're understood, the thing that a facial expression can help someone know a meaning, or know if you're serious or if you're trying to be silly. If you don't have that, it's like missing one of your senses, literally. Mm-hmm. And we now have calls regularly. We started out every day, and for some people, they had never done it. Some people had never done the video ever in their career, even though they'd been in IT for however many years. They just chose not to do it. Now we, on the teams that I lead and I co-lead among the leadership team, man, we crave that, and we talk about it. And it doesn't mean that everybody likes every aspect about it, but we now look forward to these leadership touch bases, even if we don't have a decision to make. But just so we can socially connect and check in on one another and ask about how things are going, and our collective performance as a group now, and our productivity, it's higher than it's ever been. And some of it's practicality, right? I mean, for example, you mentioned saving money at the gas pump because you don't have to make the commute to the office every single day. That's huge. But now you're sitting in front of the screen. If you're a knowledge worker like we are, where most of your job is working with a computer, right. We are producing collectively more deliverables in a shorter amount of time, and we are being able to demonstrate achievements on strategic and tactical plans in a way that we never imagined before, even though we've been dealing with all these other challenges. So there's some benefit, there's silver lining to some of the bad things that we've had to kind of endure as a country and as a world and as a company and as us as families and individuals. One thing that we know is when the pandemic is behind us, there will be back to normal, but that normal will be a little bit different. We know that, right? This is going to have a life-changing effect. But one thing that it will help companies do is be more efficient in the usage of their resources. So one thing I can share with you is that, right off the bat, because of the challenge, I mentioned that we had to make a little bit of an investment in the video conferencing equipment around the world so that we would be able to have leaders that have to travel a long way to get to Charlotte, where we normally combine and have leadership meetings. We cut that travel in half already. So imagine a company of our size with all those facilities and all those people traveling and spending that money. That's a significant savings to the company. And notwithstanding the reduction in production in certain business lines because of the lost business, because of the impact to the economy, just think what that'll do to your bottom line, and look what that'll do to your profit margin. And if you're really paying attention to cash flow, and a lot of companies are, then there are things that we will still do moving forward once we're past this pandemic, and that's, again, Mike, I think you mentioned, just being able to roll with the changes. In one of your earlier comments, we as leaders, we in technology, and then we as a world, we survive these things and we move forward. And so certain things will be better, but we will miss other things, right? Like the close social contact that we used to enjoy, and coming into one another's office and, giving somebody a hard time or giving somebody a hug, a lot of us miss that. Some of the teammates mentioned that they really, really missed that. But if they didn't have the video conferencing, they don't know what they'd do, right? So just wanted to mention that.
That's great. I think, I've heard, Mike and I have heard from so many people that they've gotten to know colleagues more intimately, even family members, pets. They're often, coming into the screen, and you hear about them and you see them, and it's become more real. I think that's the one big positive that I've seen come from the pandemic. I'm sure there'll be other things that we'll think of, but right now it's difficult to, I miss getting together with Valentine IT, and I'm consulting for a company up in Raleigh, and I've never met anybody in person, and it's just such a different experience when you're there physically, but you make the best you can of it. And I think I really appreciate the fact that you brought that up and made a comment about it, because I think it's really important to acknowledge it. And I also really appreciate the idea that, we need to reach out to our colleagues who are, less fortunate, reach out and lend a hand wherever we can. I know we've all been trying to do that wherever possible. And I know a lot of folks who have been displaced or furloughed. Furlough's just another word for not having a job anymore, it seems like. But reaching out, trying to help people as best we can. I think that's what we have to do as neighbors and colleagues in our community. So appreciate your mentioning that, James. It means a lot to both Mike and I.
Yeah, James.
Well, it means a bunch to me. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
No, thank you for your time. I know as we kind of wrap up the show, I know you're in the know on a lot of different things. Are there any cool resources out there that you look at online? Web publications? Is there anybody that's kind of in the know? Again, I know with the whole COVID thing, some of our friends that kind of travel around different cities are on tough times. So are there any cool new resources that if folks are looking for something neat and they're in cyber, or they have interest in cyber, where would you kind of direct them? And then finally, is there anything that you'd like to plug in regards to, I know you've got a lot of involvement in the local community, but also with your company, Novalex, and anything else that you'd like to plug before we close the show?
Sure, it's a long list, but I would say to anybody watching the podcast that if you're not already, advancing in a career, or if you just have a personal interest in cybersecurity or information security, there are a number of really good outlets, and there are some really good personalities that you can look to. But the professional organizations in the communities, the local ones and the national ones, they have a collection of all the resources where you can go and you can learn and pick through the ones that are most meaningful to you. And so I'll just mention a few. because all three of us are involved in the Ballantyne IT professionals group and the Lake Norman IT professionals group as leaders, as participants in the discussions, and we share with our colleagues there. I want to make that plug first and foremost because I have a feeling that a lot of the people watching this underground podcast, the CXO podcast, are in our community. And I know that people are at different levels in their career, and I know that people are changing their interests and maybe have done something else in IT and maybe want to move over into risk management or cyber or privacy or the things that we talk about a lot these days, because those are the trends. So start there with these groups, and then if you've not heard of InfraGard, it's a great public-private partnership between the private sector and the FBI to protect critical infrastructure sectors. And you know, my career has improved. I mean, there's a direct connection to certain advances in my career because of the people that I've met in these groups, the people who have shared their expertise, and InfraGard's one of them. And you mentioned at the beginning that I had brought in some other groups, and that we had sponsored some other groups. Another one is Secure World, the Secure World Expo. They have about 20 big security symposiums or conferences every year. Now they're all virtual. Another thing we didn't really talk about, but they have a collection of great resources. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on, but that's just a few. And if you can get all this information by becoming involved, join the Ballantyne IT professionals group, join the Lake Norman IT professionals group, come and listen, see what it's like, come and get involved. A lot of the proceeds that are collected during the sponsorship of the events and the learning activities that we do all throughout the year go to fantastic causes to benefit people. But that's where you get to meet the people who really are the experts. You guys know, but for the people watching the podcast, the people that attend these things and share their knowledge and do the presentations those are the people that you can just ask questions and learn, and just take that back to your company, back to your family, if it's a cybersecurity thing that you think can help your family. But just get involved, immerse yourself in it, and before you know it, it'll just be part of your life, and hopefully a better part. And then the final thing I would say, if I could just leave a little nugget of usefulness, of wisdom, maybe even, is don't be selfish with your knowledge. Share it. Even if you don't feel comfortable sharing it, like in an open forum, like on a podcast like this, or in a meeting with a bunch of peers, don't just keep it in, because it took you a long time to amass that tribal knowledge and that expertise. So even if you see somebody that could use it, send it to them in an email if they'll take it in the right way, but just share. And then that'll make our community better, and it'll make our world better. And then coming out of this coronavirus, we'll just keep that momentum going in your career, among your teams, and at home and your family. Just share the knowledge.
Oh, that's great. Anything that you'd like to plug in regards to Novalex, or anything else before we close the show?
Well, Novalex is a fantastic company, run by fantastic people, and operated by fantastic people through all walks of life, all around the globe. Go to Novalex.com, look at some of our brands, and just kind of be amazed. Like you may be using the products, and you may have been using our products for years, and you may not have even known it. So it's just kind of cool to be part of something like that has a global reach.
I'll be inspecting my Walmart bag, that's for sure. We go there. We have a grocery store by us, so we're there frequently. So I'll definitely pay a lot more attention to that going forward.
Well, I was just going
Yeah.
to say we've got this podcast in the bag, but I thought that'd be too corny if I did. Sorry. Couldn't help
There you
myself.
go. Hey,
Hey, you got to have some levity, right? You got to have some levity. Yeah, the other thing that I always laugh about is somebody asked me about, well, you said you made the bags for such and such of a company. And I said, yeah, well, when I got home, the bag broke and all my stuff fell out. Well, you know, companies choose the thickness of the bags. I mean, you know, you can buy more millions of them if they're super, super, super thin. And some companies pay more because they want to have like really sturdy bags. And then of course on the industrial side, we make like bags that like you can't tear. You know, they can hold all kinds of stuff.
yeah, you said medical, right? You got stuff they can.
Yeah, medical waste bags,
Yeah.
bank bags, lockable bank bags, food service inserts. But yeah, just the bags, the paper and plastic, it just runs the entire gamut of inexpensive and disposable to reusable. And the final thing I would say is the majority of our products are sustainable. We have scientists on staff that work to make our products as sustainable as possible. And our CEO and president is very concerned, and he actually goes and visits with people that are vocal critics of industries that make plastics, just to educate them and show them what Novalex is doing to be a solution and not part of the problem. Yes, we make paper and plastic, but we don't throw it in the ocean, and we do things to make it so they're biodegradable, so they're recyclable. You know, we're really taking that aspect serious, and that's not my expertise, by the way. I'm not one of our scientists on staff that develop those processes and that chemistry, but that is something that all of us as employees of Novalex feel very good about, because we know we're helping people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, James. We really appreciate having you on the podcast. Joe, anything else to close up the show?
No, it's been a great session, James. Great hearing your insights and your journey, and we wish you well and continued success in the local market here.
Thanks so much, guys. My pleasure.
Take care, James.
Take care.
Bye. Bye, everyone.